music, love life. It's time for the deep analysis of the top headlines from Nigerian newspapers. You're welcome to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1, and it's time for us to talk about what's happening in the country. We'll be having the analysis right here in the studio, but you can join us from wherever it is that you're listening to us from. So, WhatsApp line to send the messages to, your contribution, and anything you'd like to say in addition to what has been said or what has not been said. 0911 999 0981. Again, 0911 999 0981. Please remember to keep it civil, and it would be lovely to have it, summarized and a little bit shorter so that we can take more messages from other people. And you can also join us on YouTube, where we're currently streaming live at Smooth 92.1 FM Lagos. At Smooth 92.1 FM Lagos. To have the analysis done this morning, I have the company of Gbubemi Atimomo. Good morning.
Good morning, Oluwaseun. Good morning, Lagos.
All right, let's get right into it, starting with this one coming from The Guardian. Inspector General of Police Kayode Egbetokun has urged Nigerians to resist the alleged demand for a mobilization fee by policemen before they perform their duties.
Alleged.
Alleged.
So I laughed when I saw the headline. Well, according to him, he said that mobilization fees are unknown to them in their police acts and their guidebooks and their rule books, regulations, blah, blah, blah. Yes, understandable. Definitely it's not there, because the government is supposed to pay the cost of all their mobilization and everything. However, in practice, a lot of people have reported that they've had to pay to mobilize the police to investigate their cases. So whether it is foiling of their vehicles, whether it is some sort of stimulation
Getting them
contribution or
lunch.
something, exactly, people have had to, quote unquote, help the police to be able to discharge their duties. I was trying to recall, there was a story I read last week. Unfortunately, I can't quite remember. And the person was detailing, they had an incident, I think, of a missing person or something, and they had gone to report to the police, but the police didn't do anything because they said that they didn't have the resources to be able to investigate. So this person had to, make funds available to aid them. For me, so it's sort of on two parts. He says that citizens should resist every demand for mobilization. So it's easier said than done. Of course, I can resist a demand for mobilization. However, will the police act? He has also said, that there are channels whereby people can lay their complaints. There's the crime CRU platform where people can go, customer platform rather, where people can go and table their complaints with police officers. Now, not a lot of people know that, and the reality is, at the point at which people have an urgent case on their hands, so whatever the issue is, we assume that there's some sort of urgency to it. Nobody's immediately thinking about, let me go on the platform and go and report. You expect that you go to a police station, the police will, take your statement or whatever and will begin investigating the matter. However, if that is not the case, it doesn't ordinarily come to everybody to think, oh, let me go and complain. You immediately want to think, I need to fast track this process. Because unfortunately, we've become a society where self-help has been the way to go. Think about it. We joke and we say, oh, there's no public water supply, build your borehole. The roads are bad, buy an SUV or a Jeep or something.
The
Light
power
isn't
supply,
constant,
get solar
exactly, get a
paneling.
generator,
Yes.
get, inverters and all that. So we've come to the point where we sort of expect that we need to help, to get things moving along. And not a lot of people trust that even if they do complain, that these complaints will be held, will be heard rather. Now, for the IGP also, it also calls into question because, in reality, we complain all the time about police pay, how much, they get, how much they get for living wages as well, aside from just salaries, operational resources as well, vehicles, internet, all those sort of things. We see a lot of police vans in town and they look as though they've been in multiple accidents, how they're even on the road sometimes, one just begins to wonder. So the question is also for the IGP as well. Are your police officers, are your police stations properly resourced? Do they have the resources that they need to be able to pursue these cases? Because that is where, I will then say that he can say that, that the officers don't ask for mobilization. And if people are constantly sharing the hoops and challenges that they face in getting their cases investigated, I would expect that at some point the IGP should have heard. There should be a unit, for example, that tracks these sorts of things. Granted, not everybody complains, but some people would have complained. Have these things been investigated? So the IGP hasn't even made reference to the fact that, oh, we've heard these sort of things before, we've investigated them, or we're investigating them. He's just come out and said that it's not known to their rule books. Yes, it's not known to their rule books, but the practice is that people always, okay, maybe not always, but people usually need to facilitate resources to make their investigations happen. And that should be checked. The IGP, in line with encouraging people to resist these demands, should also realize that they need to be able to properly resource their police stations, their police officers. So this is even like a broader conversation that has always been had, and will probably keep on having until, the police officers or the police force, is properly um, remunerated in terms of wages, salaries, and all of that.
I remember reading a person's thread on X. I don't know if it is true or not, but it was around Ogudu, and the person mentioned how they called the police station in the dead of the night, robbery going on, and they said that they didn't have fuel in the car.
Mm.
And that's on in the comment section of that thread. Different people had different accounts, and it just makes you wonder what exactly is going on. Is it that the fuel allowance is not provided, or someone decided to go siphon the fuel, or somebody who was just trying to play smart? But I think again a little bit of compassion could be exercised, especially when it is life threatening. People are in danger, so you need to.
So, it's a bit of a half and half. I've also had the same views. But sometimes I think about the fact that, when you work in certain kinds of roles, so people also have this similar conversation about doctors, for example, in hospitals. I think you get numbed to some of those urgencies. And this is not me excusing the police. I'm just saying that when things have happened over and over and over again, you just
You couldn't care
consider
less.
exactly, you can't care less, consider them as, this is just everyday life. And at the end of the day, police officer is probably asking, I don't have the resources, so why should I go and risk my life to face the problem ahead when I don't have the resources to be able to handle these issues? Is my life so important to the police that I can risk it? And the reality is, I mean, if the police is not remunerating its people well, we don't expect the people to consider that, their lives are that important to be able to risk not having the resources that they need to be able to pursue investigations or track criminals or all those sorts of things.
And I think finally on that will be the issue of the leaders, the ones at the top, not having their heads in the cloud. They need to be close to what's happening, the grassroots. They need to understand, because sometimes it feels like they are living another reality. Either that, or they just have decided to be oblivious or plain or feign ignorance, because some things don't, some statements that are made, they really don't connect, at the risk of saying they don't make sense.
Exactly. So, that's why I said I laughed when he said allegedly, because to me, I'm like, everybody talks about all these things online. I'm sure there are people in his circles as well who've had to facilitate police action, except maybe those people are probably leaned on influence or whatever. But that's also similar to what we're saying, because ideally you should be able to walk into a police station, report whatever your issue is, and trust that the police should be able to investigate it, and not that you have to either mobilize the police or lean on influence to get your case handled.
All right, we move on to this one where SBM Intelligence did a deep dive. They really explored, and they came up with a study that says that Nigerians paid at least 2.57 billion naira to kidnappers between July 2024 and June 2025. while abductors demanded 48 billion naira in the same period. That is.
Extremely worrying. Um, Now, so this is another thing, another, scenario, story, whatever, that a lot of us, I think, have sort of become numb to as well, because we hear these things all the time. And for me, the report further went ahead to dimension, which regions of the country, are more prone to kidnapping
Mm,
attempts. Northwest, cited the Northwest as having the highest kidnapping figures, and also cited that Zamfara, Kaduna, and Katsina are the hotspots within that region. The report also further went ahead to dimension the payments and said that the single largest payment was made to the kidnappers of Justice Haruna Mishela of the Borno State High Court, who was abducted in September 2024, and that was 766 million naira. 766 million naira for one person. How was that money given to the kidnappers? Was it in cash? Was it in transfer? There's no way you can tell me that they couldn't have traced the movement of this money. That's another thing that always, just makes me wonder. You know, Money is traceable, it's paper. And if it's not paper, it's going through an online means. So it will go from one account to one account to one account. Even if the money ends up as crypto, which is supposedly anonymous, you will find at least the point at which it ends to crypto, and then you can hold all those other people before it gets there and begin your investigations. 766 million naira in this one incident is a huge amount of money. I don't know, and maybe it's me, but I haven't really heard so many kidnapping cases in the last few months. So it's either, the
there have
news.
been.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So it's either, the news has sort of quietened down or been downplayed or whatever. But it's a very, very worrying issue. And it's something that a lot of people, like I said earlier, have become numb to. Whether it's the police, whether it's the military, which is also supporting the police, whether it's the NSCDC, which is also, some sort of security force. All of these agencies need to be able to work together, to be able to pursue these things. I don't understand how, until date, I stand to be corrected. Personally, I've not heard that there's been an incident where they've traced a kidnapping payment from the point of payment to the point of receipt. It can't be that hard, can it?
I don't think
I
so.
don't. So I'm really, really worried. And when we think about the fact that people are probably sitting down, finding out how lucrative kidnapping is and becoming kidnappers. And this isn't even large scale kidnapping. This is anything from kidnapping from 500,000 to 1 million or whatever. We had instances of people who've kidnapped family members for meager amounts. We've heard people who have even gone ahead and even killed the people that they've kidnapped or whatever. It's a really, really worrying issue, and it should not just be swept under the carpet. I would love a situation where this report, is taking, and further investigations have been done. So SBM is a private agency, and they've collated all this data independently. I would love a situation where the police would probably like to engage with them to be able to further investigate these things. So this would move towards the purview of the IGP. Also, we need to talk about other, like the National Intelligence Agency, because many of these kidnapping issues are related to terrorism, and terrorism is a national crime. So the NIA, for example, also needs to be involved. Maybe also the DSS. I'm not quite sure what the DSS does actually. I must admit. But the DSS, all the relevant security agencies must be pulled in to investigate these things. And when we don't hear of successful investigations about many of these things, a lot of people begin to form conspiracy theories or come up with all sorts of stories that may not necessarily align with the true situation of things. And we need to be able to stem these things. So it's very, very important that this report is taken in its entirety and investigated. I'd love to see a situation where we get feedback and hear, we've acted on this report, for example, or we've been doing our own investigations, And this is what we've been able to come out with. Name and shame. If you've tracked money to some sources, let's know. You understand? People can't just go scot free. And all of this money, I'm not even talking about the small scale kidnappings. Now, the large scale kidnappings that have been linked to terrorism, are further endangering the unity of this nation. We can't allow these things to just happen like that and just look the other way, or not try to conclude investigations to determine the flow of the funds. It definitely cannot be that hard to track these monies.
Well, you can join the conversation by sending your messages to WhatsApp 0911 999 0981. I'll take this one from Chidozie, who says the IGP must be living in Mars, or he had just returned to Nigeria after 40 years for him to have alleged mobilization fee. It shows he can really call or readily call white black. Policemen sew their own uniforms and he's here lying to himself. Mr. Ajayi Olonilua says, good morning. It's a known fact that you cannot get the police to act on your case without giving them money. It's either they have no vehicle or no fuel in the vehicle where one is available. The other day, we reported a burglary case to the police, and their response was that we should bring the suspect to the station. I am sorry.
Oh my days.
Even the popular refrain that police bail is free is false. The IGP definitely knows the truth, but he's being clever by half. What do you mean, bring the suspect to the station?
If
What?
people if some people could find the
What?
suspect, they'd probably deal with the suspect on their own rather than bringing the suspect. And that's even a very stupid statement to make, I feel. Because that places the burden of investigation on the people.
Somebody, I think it's not somebody, it's something that is now known on the internet that Nigeria deserves a whole YouTube show
No, definitely.
with endless series being
Definitely.
released every week. Oh, sorry, every day. Moving on to Ondo State, still about security situation. The Ondo State government stated that it is doing everything possible to enhance food security and create employment opportunities for the people of the state. And what they're doing is deploying soldiers to secure farms and to protect farmers. Mm.
Another case of quote unquote self-help sort of. However, this is on a state level. So this is to guard against, banditry, rogue cattle herders and all of that, who have gone ahead to either be destroying farmlands or forest reserves and all of that. So they've had to engage the military. I'm wondering, is this a formal engagement? Military ideally is supposed to be, you know, deployed in times of war. This isn't necessarily war in that sense. Is this an official deployment by the Nigerian army, or is this an arrangement for a certain period of time, or how has it been classified such that the Nigerian military can be able to step in to support the state government? However, the intentions are noble, because what they've tried to do is to safeguard farmlands for their citizens, to ensure that people can actually go to farms. We've heard reports of many places in the north central, Kogi, Benue, where people can't go to farms anymore because bandits have overrun the farms, even parts of the northwest as well. Bandits have overrun the farms, bandits are charging levies to allow people access to their own farms, and all of these things are happening, and nothing seems to happen to check these people. So it's nice that the governor of Ondo State has taken the lead to be able to secure this. However, how long are these people going to, these military officers, are they going to be, in these areas where they've been deployed? Are they going to be there forever and ever? And this is just, one of the issues of addressing the symptoms rather than the root causes, and so many things have led into banditry and all of that, that needs to actually be investigated. You know, if we look at it on the plain level, you know, a lot of cattle herders have had to leave their usual regions in search of resources for their cattle. People have argued that we should have a ranching system. If people are wealthy enough to buy cattle, to be able to rear them, then they should be wealthy enough to buy land and keep their cattle within the land and provide for them, rather than having their cattle encroach on other people's farmlands and resources, So a broader conversation, and this isn't just a state because this crosses state lines as well. This is a national conversation, that we've been having and having and having. I don't think we've actually even arrived at a solution for it. So it's commendable that the governor has taken the first step. But like I said, is this an official assignment from the national and from the Nigerian army? How long are they going to be there for? Even for the people as well, because the people also need to be assured of safety and security. So if if by the time the military officers are disengaged, what plans are there to be able to keep the people safe and secure? So I know there's also a Motekun as well, in many of the southwest states, in terms of empowerment, are they empowered to be able to fight these things? So by and large, it's not easy on these people, but at least the governor is trying. This is at least a very, very good first step.
Let's move over to Imo State, where the governor, Hope Zodima, is giving hope to the civil service by approving a new minimum wage of 104,000 naira for workers in the state.
So I hear that there were cries of jubilation, because this is him doing much more than the national minimum wage, which is at 70,000. And, people have said, oh, 104, the 70,000 initially allocated as national minimum wage doesn't take anybody home, and Imo citizens in this article have come and said, oh, nobody even asked the governor to improve this, but then he has, in line with this as well, he has also increased entry-level salaries for doctors to 582,000 and also entry-level salaries for lecturers to 222,000. So this is an announcement. He said that it's immediate. It's begins with immediate effect. You know, I would like us to wait to actually confirm that it's paid. I went back to do a bit of research to check if Imo State had even been compliant with 70,000 minimum, which it appears that they have. There are also reports that at the point at which the first subsidy was removed in May 2023, that they had even gone ahead to increase their minimum wage to 40,000 from 30,000. And they had also put in place a number of palliatives, like subsidizing transportation and things like that, for their citizens. So this is quite good. The states now get a lot more of the share of the federal allocation. People have wondered what states are doing with that money. Maybe we're not asking enough questions. So maybe this is one of the things that Imo State is doing with their own increased share of the federal allocation. Like I said, maybe we should wait to see if it's actually paid and sustained. But by and large, this is a good, a good act by the state governor that other states can also emulate. Nothing says that states must restrict themselves to the national minimum wage. You can always pay one. The reality is that in each of the states, the economic situation is completely different. So, for example, in Lagos, cost of living in Lagos is probably much higher than it is in maybe Sokoto, for example. Nothing says that Lagos and Sokoto must have the same national minimum wage. Lagos can decide to increase theirs as well. So this is probably also a call to other states to consider increasing their national minimum wages. And then to states that have not even started paying, they approved 70,000 naira. There's absolutely no excuse. People need to be able to speak up more, cry out more. If they're not receiving the national minimum wage, and put pressure on their representatives, to put pressure on their governors, to be able to begin the implementation of the national minimum wage.
One of the disheartening things that I think happens to Nigerians is the skepticism, a little bit of the cynicism that we exhibit each time, not because we deliberately want to, but because past events, an antecedent of individuals in the office has shown that nothing is ever done until it is done.
Yeah.
And not just that, it has to be sustained as well. So it's just heartbreaking to know that as much as this is supposed to be a sigh of relief and something calling for joy, you're never really sure until it is done, and it is done for quite a while.
Exactly. Nigerian politicians make a lot of promises they don't hold themselves to. So
I think another thing that also needs to be worked on is continuity. We have a terrible culture of maybe discontinuity. I'm not quite sure of the word. Because somebody starts something, another person comes into office with their bright idea that totally negates. And I think it's due to the sometimes party. So another person comes from one party, another
Mm.
person comes from another party. They feel, no, we don't want it. Or it's just crazy.
But sometimes even within the same party, we have these things happening. I think it's sort of somehow linked to, like I said, national self-help attitude. Everybody wants to come and put their own personal stamp. If I'm continuing the work of the previous governor, then when I'm reporting my own successes, I can't say I started this, I launched this. It doesn't sound as sweet. When you say, "Oh, I continued the work." Mm-mm-mm. Where are the ones that you started? Because people will remind you and say, "Oh, Governor ABC built this, or he started this, or he launched this policy." Where is the one that you started? People don't even understand this need for continuity, for example. But nothing says that a governor must start a new project if there are existing projects from previous administrations that have not been finished.
Mm.
And that's why sometimes you have some governors starting some projects, a new governor comes in, totally abandons that, starts his own, doesn't finish, somebody else comes. We have all sorts of unlittered projects and initiatives, unfinished projects and initiatives rather, littering, the society, which shouldn't be.
Well, to be fair to Nigerians, it's not just a Nigerian thing.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
look at Donald Trump. Look
Uh,
at the Oval Office, for instance.
okay, but if we use America as a some form of comparison, they have more structures and systems within the country that ensure to some certain extent, that things will at least progress further than they should have, except there's somebody that comes and puts
Like
an
Donald
outright,
Trump.
yeah, which is not, always
Every
the
day that you
situation
get,
for them.
you'll be surprised. But we move on to this one. The federal government has said that many federal workers cannot access its housing loan schemes because their salaries are already burdened by deduction from multiple loans taken from commercial lenders. Boy.
Why are they taking multiple loans from commercial lenders? It's because their salary is not taking them home, which is unfortunate, even with the new national minimum wage. Okay, now we're hearing stories about the revenue mobilization and revenue RMAFC, Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Allocation
Committee.
Committee, wanting to increase the salaries of the president, vice president, senators, and all of that. And they've said, oh, the president earns about 1 million naira, which is laughable, blah blah blah. No professors earn more than, is it 400 or 500,000? We hear these figures all of the time. And sometimes I wonder if people in this committee sit down and then do the actual math and say, okay, the average person, man or woman, married with a partner, a spouse, having an average of, let's say, 3 or 4 children, how much does it cost them per month to be able to survive? Those are where we should start the discussions from before we walk back towards discussing issues like minimum wage. So you can imagine, somebody on maybe level 8, which I think is entry level within the federal civil service, probably earning maybe 200,000 or something, or 250. I'm not quite sure what the numbers are. But by the time you do all of those calculations, you find out that the money is insufficient. Transportation, how much is transportation? Daily feeding. Before you start thinking about expenses that you spend on your family, things like rent, healthcare, and all of that. Granted, in federal government, they have, like HMOs for federal workers and all of that, but there's still some cases where some issues may not be covered. You have to be out of pocket for all those sort of things. So by the time you compound all of these expenses that people make, you realize that the money is really not enough. So it's nice that there's the mortgage initiative for federal civil servants. It's nice that they've also realized why many of these civil servants cannot benefit from this, and I think that should stimulate the discussion for as to how you can get them to be able to afford these things. People will continue to borrow if their take-home pay does not take them home.
Let's take some messages as we wrap it up this morning on Freshly Pressed. Joseph Mayer from Silver Estate, Ijibuligo says, good morning, Freshly Pressed. The issue of the police force response to emergency is just priority. Let it make sense. They readily have fuel and weapons to roam about, harassing citizens. and setting up roadblocks. The deafening silence from government at every levels concerning kidnapping and kidnappers in their domains is heart-wrenching. Yet they can't account for the security votes given to them monthly. May God help us. Fabian from Ekpe says, good morning, everyone. The new minimum wage being introduced by the Imo State governor is a welcome development and will set a standard for others. I hope things will be put in place to ensure that it will be sustainable and that other governors will be as proactive regarding such as well as improving security in their states. Rexy from Surulere says, to think Bauchi's Bala Usman, who's not even paying the 30,000 naira minimum wage, will come and tell us his people are hungry because of the Tinubu government. Nigerians need to wake up and hold their governors responsible for basic things like food, education, and health. Tony from Marine Beach says, there seems to be some subtle graduation in the activities of bandits over time, from kidnapping for ransom to boldly coming out to collect levies from farmers in the bush. If this trend is not checked, they'll soon leave the bush or farms and come out boldly on the streets to do the same as we hear they already do in some local governments in the north. At that point, we'll be having our own Hamas, Houthis, or Hezbollah, a government within a government. Now is the time to declare a no to roaming of cattle, which has been their cover story. Start up ranching and slam a ban on roaming of cattle. Tinubu shouldn't play politics with this, otherwise it becomes a monster that cannot be handled. And a day from Lagos says, good morning, crew. Yesterday in Kwara, people ran away from their ancestral homes. Some weeks ago, Benue, because of insecurity, while your president is cruising from Japan to Brazil. 47 people killed in Katsina in 48 hours. Killings in Plateau. More Nigerians have been killed in these 2 years of government than 8 years of Buhari. I don't think so. Imagine your chief of defense saying you should learn karate to defend yourself from armed bandits. Square pegs in round holes. I want to ask, this wasteful, unnecessary, and unfruitful traveling. Ade, here we go again. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you for your messages. Thank you for being a part of the show. Tomorrow we go again till we'll take a break for the weekend and come back, rinse and repeat to the stories. Hopefully we have things to make us smile, make us rejoice, and make us glad that we are Nigerians. But thank you, Gbubemi, for your time as always.
Thank you very much for having me, Oluwaseun.
And you can find Gbubemi on X at Orishega70. Orishega.
Just Orishega.
I am mixing it with Lakunle. All right, we continue with the show. Grapevine coming up at 15 minutes past 8 o'clock. You're listening to Smooth Breakfast on Smooth 98.1. My name is Oluwaseun Olusegun.
The headlines, the stories, the news, in-depth analysis of national current affairs.
Thank you. Oh boy.
Freshly pressed on Smooth 98.1.
Turn. Sandy.
Press 1 for all your entertainment stories.
The buzz, the rumors, the big stories. Spice up your day with some entertainment on